whether you have $1,000 or $100, doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you today the best MLS midfielders that you can buy on any SoRare budget. My name is Wes. I'm with Great East Space. I'm a senior business analyst at a company here in Nashville. So breaking down data, understanding where value is, that's what I do for a living. I'm applying that into SoRare, which is much more enjoyable, obviously. But the way I'm going to look at this is I got 52 MLS midfielders. I broke them down using multiple criteria. I pulled in 12,300 data points from multiple places around the web. Obviously, SoRare data provides a lot of awesome data, but I also went and found things that help me calculate a market value. So that's something a metric I created that captures things like potential, age, opportunity, and more so than just how do they perform in their last X amount of games. So wove that together with a consistency rank. So how often did they hit at least a certain floor of points? That's going to be important, especially if you are playing for a threshold, trying to get that .02 ETH in the global all-stars. And then podium percent. So how frequently did they put up a game-winning type of week? That is, if you're trying to potentially place, get on the podium, win some free cards, that's going to be extremely important for you, and you want a player that's going to be on the podium frequently. And then DNP percent. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do. If your guy isn't playing, you aren't going to succeed. So let's jump into this. I meant it when I said for any budget, right? We got players broken down into 4 categories, and this is based on values as of March 5th, the best offer that was on the transfer market, so you could go out and buy these guys. No questions asked, no haggling, no auctions. Buy them on the transfer market for these prices as of March 5th. So Premier, $1,000 plus. Our number one guy is Pozuelo. So he is a candidate every year for MLS MVP. He came over. He was actually captain of FC Genk, which is over in Europe and Belgium, one of the premier teams over there. So he's got a lot of really good experience, and he's still only 28 years old, maybe 29 now. So a lot of good soccer left in front of him, and puts up great scores week in and week out. Nicholas Lodero. So another great option. All these guys you can't really go wrong with. He puts up, as you can see, a 69% podium rate. So if you're really just focused on winning cards, that might be a really strong option for you. Lewis Morgan. So not quite as prolific on the podium percent, but the reason that's really exciting is he's only 23. So A, you can play him in the under 23 tournaments, but B, you're going to have him for a long time to play him in different tournaments and potentially have a very high return on investment. All right, last but not least, the Great East Space bonus player. So this is not necessarily metrics driven. This is somebody that I picked out of this category that I think has a really good opportunity in front of him and maybe of value. So Jesus Medina. I actually checked on him today, and his prices have come down. So he may actually fall into our high budget category, not as much the premier budget anymore. But I think that presents an even better opportunity, right? And again, similar to Lewis Morgan, very young, very talented, and high productivity. So let's transition and talk about high budget. $500 to $1,000, you can get these guys on your team. I think this is a sweet spot for the midfielders. Obviously, it's still kind of pricey, but if you're really trying to win, I don't think you necessarily need the premier players, even though, if you can afford them, that's great and offers you some more consistency with the big weeks. First off, Diego Valeri. So, awesome player. Former MLS MVP. Still puts up great numbers. I mean, he really should be in the premier category, but I think it's because he's 34 years old now. So people are a little afraid to invest quite as much into him just because you may only get a couple of years of service out of him before he retires. Christian Roldan. Awesome numbers, right? 69% podium. So he puts up huge weeks consistently, and he's only 24. So, he's going to be around for a long, long time, putting up great stats as far as anybody could predict, right? So another really strong investment there. Artur. So again, right? Keeping with the age theme, only 23 years old. He came over to the MLS fairly recently, and has been a real force and that is reflected in his price. He's a little bit expensive, probably for what he's performing at today, but his potential and the opportunity for him to continue to improve and being able to use him for a long time, as he's only 23 years old, make him a value. And the Great East Space bonus player, Cole Bassett. So Cole is a Colorado Rapids homegrown player. He's only 19 years old now. A really interesting stat I found on him. So he covered the 5th most land of anybody per minute played that played at least 500 minutes. So a lot to say there to say he is all over the field at all times. He gets back on defense. He pushes forward on offense. He's always around the ball, always involved, and he is so young. If he continues to develop and improves his skills just a little bit, I think he's very quickly going to be in that premier bucket and, either be a very, very strong force in the MLS or potentially go over to Europe and, continue to produce very well over there. So, super young, talented kid with a ton of potential. All right, mid-budget. So this is where we start finding some values that you may be able to plug in, at a little bit of a lower price point. Starting with Jonathan Osorio. So he has been kind of helping to orchestrate things up in Toronto for a while. Very strong organization up there, consistently competing in the MLS near the top of the standings. And Jonathan's a big part of that. So not surprised to see him at the top of the list here as our best value for mid-budget midfielders in the $200 to $500 range. Extremely consistent, 56% podium. Not a lot else to say about that. Jan Gregus. So, apologize if I pronounce any of these names wrong. He is one of the most underrated players in the MLS. I think he's a huge value, especially if you're looking for someone you can plug in your global all-stars to really kind of set that floor for you. I think you can plug him in there. He'll put up 50 to 70, 75 points a week with that 20% captain bonus. That gives you such a strong floor that you can build off of, and then really put some kind of low-budget guys around him to pretty cheaply construct a team to get your ETH payout. So I think he's an awesome player, extremely underrated, very valuable. Medran, young player. He's very talented, a lot of, very technically sound. And again, another good value here, kind of in that $200 to $500 range. Not as many big games, but very consistent. And then the East-Space bonus player is Diego Chara. So Diego Chara is a defensive midfielder, which, he's not scoring a ton of goals. But he distributes well out of the back, and he is always involved, always, constantly moving, making tackles all throughout the game, and facilitates well once he stops the attacking players, kind of gets that counterattack pushing forward, which leads to some assists and opportunities through that. A little bit older, but again, that usually means you can get them on a little bit of a budget, which is, not a bad thing. You can outperform the price you pay for him. All right, so before we transition into low-budget players, if you could give me a like if this has brought you any value, subscribe. Got more videos coming about budgets as budget players, as well as a couple other things where I've looked at the data in SoRare and think I've found some opportunities and some things that you might want to be cautious of moving forward. So give me a like, subscribe if I brought you value. More to come. Now, low-budget players. If you're just trying to get your foot in the door, this is the place to start, and there are some great options here. So, starting with Darwin Sarin. Very, very good player. He, again, in this low budget, what you're going to get a lot of is players who have a very high floor, very consistent, 90% of the time. That means he's only hurting you 10% of the time. If 1 in every 10 weeks he has a bad week, but you're only paying less than $200 for him, that's pretty good as an entry point. You can kind of build your roster around him, maybe get some other players with more upside. Very, very strong there. Similar story here for Thiago Santos. Thiago is a little bit cheaper, maybe a little bit less upside. But again, very, very strong player, ton of upside, great value. Joseph Claude Gao, really, really fast player at Cincinnati, plays on the right side. He isn't a big goal scorer, but he's involved in the attack frequently. Hasn't led to a ton of assists necessarily, but he was one of the bright spots on their team. And if Cincinnati takes a step forward, which could easily happen here in the second season after being a newcomer to the league last year, Joseph Claude could be a big piece of that and could benefit from potentially more goals being scored by the team as a whole. And then the East Base bonus player is Gadi Kinda. He's someone on the low budget that is going to put up big weeks a lot, which I think is exciting, right? So I mentioned earlier, you have your Darwin Sarins, your Thiago Santos, have a very good kind of baseline that you're going to set for you, where you kind of know what you're going to get. And then if you plug someone like Gadi Kinda into your extra slot, you've got a little bit more of that high upside. So those two put together, whenever Kinda has a good week, you have a consistent week from Sarin or Santos, and all of a sudden you've got a really strong score that you could potentially climb up the rankings with and maybe even win a card. And these guys are just in the $0 to $200 range. So I think SoRare has exploded in popularity lately. A lot of people coming in means a lot of money coming in with the scarcity of cards, which I think is definitely a good thing for the long-term kind of outlook of SoRare. It's just a supply and demand game, which means that supply is staying the same, demand is going way up, so prices are going to go way up. But there's still opportunity. You just have to really kind of dive in to find it and make sure you're not just buying cheap players, you're buying good value players. And I think this can hopefully help you guys do that. If it does, give me a like, subscribe, more to come. Forwards and goalkeepers coming up soon for the MLS. Other leagues soon to follow. Probably going to start with Asia, but let me know if you have a preference. Maybe the J League, maybe the K League. But yeah, other than that, looking forward to continuing to dive into SoRare, learning as I go as well, and then sharing what I learned with you guys. So if you've got any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll get back with you. And other than that, hope everyone has a great day.